Hi, good evening. It's very late na in the evening. Almost mga mag-aalauna na yata. Kaya lang, parang hindi ko gustong matulog nang hindi ko talaga nababasa itong napakagandang sulat na ito from a Korean. Because I believe this will become a sort of an eye-opener to many of us, sa tayong mga Pilipino. And it might also embarrass us as a people, because it takes a Korean, to point out what is wrong with us. This letter of this Korean was part of an essay written by a certain Anne Tiangco, which appeared at www.journal.com.ph, which was entitled "The Letter That Made Pinoys Cry." When the Filipinos in Korea read this letter of this Korean, whose name is, what's the name of this Koreano? Jae-yoon Kim, they really were affected, and they cried so much because of this letter. And one Filipino, according to this essay of Anne Tiangco, one Filipino in the person of Professor Marlon Aves Diloy, a professor of information technology at Yunjin College in Daegu, Korea, expressed the pain that he felt while he read this letter. And the same reaction of pain was felt by many other Filipinos who read this letter of Jae-yoon Kim. And this Professor Diloy shared this letter of Kim, and Filipinos in Korea developed that kind of renewed sense of nationalism and love for country. And there are thousands of Filipinos in Korea, South Korea. And Professor Diloy expressed or made some kind of expression of hope that this letter of Jae-yoon Kim will be able to touch the hearts and the minds of many Filipinos, not only in Korea, but also here in the Philippines. The way this letter touched the hearts of those Filipinos in Korea. Let me read this letter to you tonight. This is now the letter of Jae-yoon Kim. Let me read it. Filipinos always complain about corruption in the Philippines. Do you really think that corruption is the problem of the Philippines? Asked Jae-yoon Kim. I do not think so. I strongly believe that the problem is the lack of love for the Philippines. Wow, ang sakit. Hindi corruption ang problem according to Kim, but lack of love for the Philippines. Nasaktan ako noon although mahal na mahal ko tong bansang ito. Let me first talk about my country, Korea. It might help you to understand my point. After the Korean War, South Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world. Koreans had to start from scratch because the entire country was destroyed completely after the Korean War. And we have no natural resources. So, ang Pilipinas, mayaman sa natural resources. I have been to the New Bilibid prison that is here in the Philippines. Napunta rito si Jae-jun Kim. What made me sad in the prison were the prisoners who do not have any love for their country. They go to mass and work for church. They pray every day. However, they do not love the Philippines. I talked to two prisoners at the maximum security compound, and both of them said they would leave the Philippines right after they are released from prison. They said that they would start a new life in other countries and never come back to the Philippines. Nakakainis ng dalawang bilanggong to as if naman madali silang makakaalis sa sarili nilang bansa. Naging convicted nga sila. Nainis ako sa kanilang dalawa. Parang anong-ano sila sa sarili nilang bansa. Kung saan sila gumawa ng kasalanan. O sige, tuloy-tuloy ang lola ninyo sa pagbabasa ng sulat ni Kim. Many Koreans have a great love for Korea, so that we were able to share our wealth with our neighbors. The owners of factory and company distributed their profit to their employees fairly, so that employees could buy what they needed and save money for the future and their children. Wow, ang sarap naman ng mga tao sa Korea, ng mga Koreano. Hindi nila sinasarili ang kanilang mga kinikita, ang kanilang profit, ang profit ng mga negosyante. They share it to their employees fairly. Ilang bang kaya sa Pilipinas ang ganyan? Ilang mga employers kaya sa Pilipinas ang ganyan? Sinishare ang profit nila. When I was in Korea, I had a very strong faith and wanted to be a priest. However, when I came to the Philippines, I completely lost my faith. I was very confused when I saw many unbelievable situations in the Philippines. Street kids always makes me sad, and I see them every day. The Philippines is the only Catholic country in Asia, but there are too many poor people here. People go to church every Sunday to pray, but nothing has been changed. My parents came to the Philippines and saw the situation. They told me that Korea was much poorer than the present Philippines when they were young. By the way, I would like to state that this letter was written some years ago, before siguro mga early 2000, because I read this before my class in my doctoral class so many years ago also. Before 2000, I don't know who was the president at that time. Maaring si Arroyo. Mayroon basta naging presidente si Arroyo. Hanggang kay si Estrada, si Arroyo, then si Pinoy. I don't know. So, yung mga panahon na yon, ito yung sinasabi niya, sinulat niya ito, no? Siguro, baka earlier pa, baka panahon pa rin ni na from Fidel Ramos, Erap, Arroyo, Pinoy. Okay, so ito yung period na sinulat niya itong letter na to. They are so sorry that there are so many beggars and street kids. When we went to Pagsanghan, okay, noon pa kasi nakakapunta pa ng Pagsanghan, I forced my parents to take a boat ride because it would be fun. However, they were not happy after taking the boat. They said that they would take the boat no more because they were sympathetic with the boatmen, for the boatmen were very poor and had small frames, mga payat. Most of the people just took a boat and enjoyed it. But my parents did not enjoy it because of love for the boatmen. Naawa. My mother, who had been working with Catholic Church since I was very young, told me that if we just go to Mass without changing ourselves, we are not Catholic indeed. Eye-opener na naman ito sa mga simba ng simba, tapos hindi naman nagbabago, no? Faith should come with action. She added that I have to love Filipinos and do good things for them because all of us are the same and have received a great love from God. I want Filipinos to love their neighbors and country as much as they love God, so that the Philippines will be well off. Imagine that, isa pang dayuhan nag-iisip ng mabunda para sa bansa natin. Kung minamahal nga naman natin ng Diyos, edi mahal din na nating bansa. Yun ang sabi ng Koreano. I am sure that love is the keyword which Filipinos should remember. Love is the keyword which the Filipinos should remember. We cannot change the sinful structure at once. It should start from person. Sa atin daw magmumula ang pagbabago. Tuloy ko ang pagbasa. Teka, ayusin ko ang aking pagkakasandal. Koreans used to talk about the Philippines, for Filipinos were very rich in Asia then. Imagine that, the glorious years then. Sabi niya, we envied the Filipinos. Koreans really wanted to be well off like Filipinos. Imagine, nahangaan tayo noon. Many Koreans died of famine. My father's brother also died because of famine. Paggutom sa Korea, panahon ng sagasagana ng Pilipinas. Kaya ingit na ingit ang mga Koreano no sa mga Pilipino. Korean government was awfully corrupt and is still very corrupt beyond your imagination. Okay, iniisip natin, tayo ang iniisip lang lagi natin ang korap-korap ng pamahalaan natin. Mas corrupt daw sa beyond your imagination. Korean government was awfully corrupt and is still very corrupt beyond your imagination. But Korea was able to develop dramatically because Koreans really did their best for the common good with their heart burning with patriotism. So kung may corruption, ito sinabi rin sa akin ito nung kaibigan kong Koreano eh. Sabi niya, alam mo, sabi niya, you know, Dr. Rosales, there is so much corruption in Korea, but the people actually ay hindi naman pinababayaan. Sabi gano'n. Although that is not a good excuse, no? But, ika nga, kung may corrupt sa kanila, binabahagi yon. Dinidevelop ang mga tao, dinidevelop ang bansa. Okay? Koreans did not work just for themselves, but also for their neighbors and country. Nagpubulol-bulol na tuloy ako. Education inspired young men with the spirit of patriotism. So sa eskwelahan talagang ang patriotism is being taught very, very strongly. Ito kaya, parang hindi naman. 40 years ago, President Park took over the government to reform Korea. Kailangang i-reform ang Korea, so Park did that. He tried to borrow money from other countries. But it was not possible to get a loan and attract a foreign investment because the economy situation of South Korea was so bad. Korea had only 3 factories. So President Park sent many mine workers and nurses to Germany so that they could send money to Korea to build a factory. They had to go through horrible experience. In 1964, President Park visited Germany to borrow money. Hundreds of Koreans in Germany came to the airport to welcome him, and they cried there as they saw President Park. They asked him, "President, when can we be well off?" Imagine, tinatanong nila, paano po kailan uulan ng ating bansa, President? And they were crying. That was the only question everyone asked of him. President Park cried with them and promised that Korea would be well off if everyone works hard for Korea. And the President of Germany got the strong impression on them and lent money to Korea. So President Park was able to build many factories in Korea. So here was the President of Korea witnessing how passionate the Koreans were in their desire to develop their country and their desire to make their country better. And so money was lent to Korea and they were able to put up factories. How about us? What are we doing? We are destroying our own country before the eyes of the world because of our own personal interests. So, ibang-iba ang mga Koreano. They will not destroy their country before the eyes of the world. They will work hard for the beautiful image of their country. Ganyan sana tayong mga Pilipino. He always asked Koreans to love their country from their heart. Many Korean scientists and engineers in the USA came back to Korea to help develop the country because they wanted the country to be well off. Though they received very small salary, they did their best for Korea. Nag-sacrifice, kahit na maliit na sweldo, dito kami sa Korea, dito kami sa bansa namin, tutulungan namin para umunlad. They always hope that their children would live in a well-off country. The dream is not for themselves only, but for others, for the countrymen, for fellow Koreans. What about us? My parents always brought me to the places where poor and physically handicapped people lived. They wanted me to understand their life and help them. I also worked for Catholic Church when I was in the army. Sundalo pala ito. The only thing I learned from Catholic Church was that we have to love our neighbors. And I have loved my neighbor. Have you cried for the Philippines? Tanong niya, have you cried for the Philippines? Dito talagang ako, emotional na ako dito. I have cried for my country several times. I also cried for the Philippines because of so many poor people. Yes, I myself, I have cried for our country several times. Not only because of the many poor people, but because of the way we are destroying some of us are destroying our country before the eyes of the world. For what? For personal interest, not for the national interest. I'm very sorry. Love must start in everybody in a small scale and have to grow. A lot of things happen if we open up to love. Let's put away our prejudices and look at our worries with our new eyes. Set aside our prejudices. Set aside everything that ay hindi makakatulong para sa ikabubuti ng bansa. Yun ang parang ibig sabihin itong sulat ng Koreano na to. I discovered that every person is worthy to be loved. Trust in love because it means changes possible. It makes changes possible. Love changes you and me. It changes people, context, and relationships. It changes the world. If we can only love everyone, perhaps what a beautiful world this world will be, and what a beautiful country our country would be. Please love your neighbors and your country, sabi ng Koreano. Jesus Christ said that whatever we do to others, we do to Him. In the Philippines, there is God for people who are abused and abandoned. There is God who is crying for love. If you have a child, teach him how to love the Philippines. Diyos ko naman, isang Koreano sinasabi sa atin, turuan niyo anak ninyo paano mamahalit ang Pilipinas. Parang nakakahiya, parang hiyang-hiya na ako dito. Teach him why he has to love his neighbors and why he has to love his country. You already know that God also will be very happy if you love others. That's all I really want to ask you, Filipinos. Imagine that, Koreano. That's all I want to really ask from you, Filipinos. Love your country. Parang parang ang bigat sa dibdib ko ngayon itong pagkatapos ko itong i-share sa inyo. Parang nakakaramdam ako talaga ng malaking pain, malalim na pain. Because when I think of many of the past of what is happening in our country, especially nowadays, wala na tayong narinig kundi away, kundi siraan, kung hindi negative things about the government, negative things about this person, negative things about that person, batuhan ng ng mga bagay na hindi maganda. And these are the things that our young people are learning from the old people, from the leaders, from those who are supposed to be the models of good manners, of good behavior, of a strong love of country, of protecting the country, of making the country beautiful, the eyes of the world. This is what this Korean, Jae-yoon Kim, was telling us when he wrote this letter. This letter was written so many years ago, but still there are truths to what he was saying. We have to love this country, and when we love this country, we have to forget ourselves, our own selfish interests, but think only of one thing: our country, our beautiful country. Mag-away-away, wag na tayong mag-away-away. Wag na tayong magsiraan. Magmahala na lang tayo, ano man ang kulay natin. Ano man ang sekta natin kinabibilangan. Kung meron tayong pagtatalo, magtalo tayo nang nandyan pa rin ang pagmamahal sa isa't isa. Kasi nakakahiya. Kakaya dito, sa Koreano na to, siya pa yung nagturo sa atin na, sabi sa atin na, what is wrong with the Philippines? It is not corruption that is the problem in the Philippines. It is the lack of love of the Filipinos for their own country. That is what is wrong, according to this Koreano. My goodness. Ay, naku, gusto kong naiinis ako. Kinakatituloy yung tenga ko sa buwisit. Kasi, it takes a foreigner to write that kind of letter and show to us our defects as the people. Let us now reflect on that letter. And let us try to change. Country first. before ourselves. Make our image before the world beautiful. If we have problem, let us settle here that problem in our country, not bring it outside of the country. Our system is working here. So dito tayo dito tayo magsabi. Do not I don't know what to say anymore. I'm so affected by this letter. Parang nagagalit ako. Ayoko. This is the first time I have this in my blog. I don't like this kind of blog. Kaya lang kailangan sabihin ko sa inyo Sabihin ko sa inyo yung sinabi ng Koreano na ito. Baka sakali magbago tayo ng mga pananaw natin. Ay, nako. Good night. Hindi ko masabing Hindi ako makapag-good night ng masaya kasi hindi ako masaya. Pagkabasa ko ng sulat na yan, I feel very, very much affected. Your Lola is definitely affected. I want our country to be developed. Unti-unti na nating nagagawa yan. Huwag na tayong magsiraan. Magmahala na lang tayo, please. Alam ko, hindi naman ako maririnig. I'm a voice in the wilderness. I'm an old woman. I have no more strength. But deep in my heart, I just want the best for our country. So that the generations yet to come will live in a country that is not only beautiful, but progressive. Where the Filipinos, where the people are loving each other. Where the people are respecting one another, sharing. They disagree, but they do not quarrel, and they do not throw. Ano ba yan? Bakit ganito nga ba nangyayari sa bansa natin? Well, I just pray that everything will turn out well for this country. And every Filipino would come together and embrace each other as brothers. Whatever our culture, what our tradition, our political inclination, basta Pilipino tayo, and we love each other very much. I hope the time will come. I hope. Good night.